I pushed open my bedroom door and froze. Three strangers were ripping through my dresser drawers, throwing my late husband's letters across the floor like garbage. Found the jewelry box yet? My daughter-in-law Jennifer snapped from the corner, arms crossed, watching them work. Check under the mattress. Old people always hide things there. I stood in the doorway, keys still dangling from my trembling hand, unable to speak, unable to breathe, watching my own family ransack the room where I'd mourned my husband for 2 years. Thank you for being here with me today. Please stay until the very end. This story needs to be heard. If it touches your heart, click that like button and subscribe, and I'd love to know. Drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this reaches. How many of you understand what I'm about to share? My name is Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 72 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon in September, I believed family meant sanctuary. I was wrong. Let me take you back 6 months, to the funeral where this nightmare truly began, though I didn't recognize it then. My husband Robert had just been buried, and I was still numb, still wearing black, still unable to sleep in our bed without reaching for him in the darkness. Robert and I had built 40 years together in this house. Every creaking floorboard held a memory. Every photograph on every wall told a chapter of our lives. The kitchen where I'd cooked countless Sunday dinners, the living room where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays, the bedroom where we'd whispered our dreams and fears in the dark. When Robert died, suddenly a massive heart attack while gardening on a Sunday morning, the world lost its color. Everything turned gray. Food had no taste. Music had no melody. I moved through days like a ghost, attending grief support groups because someone told me I should, but never really connecting, never really healing. My son Daniel married Jennifer 3 years ago. At the wedding, I'd had reservations. Something about the way Jennifer's eyes calculated, measured, assessed value in everything they touched. But I pushed those thoughts away. Daniel loved her. That should have been enough. It wasn't. After Robert's funeral, Jennifer started visiting more frequently. At first I appreciated the company. She'd bring groceries, help with household tasks I'd neglected in my fog of mourning. She seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being. But small things started disappearing. A silver picture frame that belonged to my grandmother, my mother's antique brooch, a pair of Robert's cufflinks. I convinced myself I'd misplaced them in my grief-stricken confusion. Old women forget things. I told myself, old widows lose track of belongings. I wasn't losing anything. Things were being stolen. Jennifer had keys to my house. I'd given them to her during those early weeks after Robert's death, when I couldn't trust myself to remember appointments or answer the door. She'd made copies. She'd been coming and going without my knowledge, cataloging valuables, planning her invasion. The Tuesday afternoon I discovered the strangers in my bedroom. I'd left for grief support group as usual, but the meeting had been canceled, a last-minute scheduling conflict. I came home 2 hours earlier than expected. I walked into my own house and heard voices upstairs, male voices, unfamiliar. My heart started pounding. I climbed the stairs slowly, every step feeling like walking toward the edge of a cliff. Then I opened my bedroom door and saw them. 3 men in casual clothes, rubber gloves on their hands, systematically searching through every drawer, every closet, every private space. Robert and I had shared. Jennifer stood near the window, directing them like a conductor leading an orchestra of violation. "Margaret," she said, when she noticed me, her voice dripping false sweetness. "You're home early." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. My legs trembled. One of the men held Robert's Purple Heart medal, the one he'd earned in Vietnam, the one he never talked about but kept in a velvet box in his nightstand. This stranger's fingers were on my husband's most sacred possession. "What are you doing?" I finally whispered. Jennifer smiled. Not a warm smile, a victor's smile. "We're conducting an appraisal, Margaret, for estate planning purposes. You understand, don't you? These things need to be documented properly. You're going through my private belongings without permission." Actually, Jennifer pulled a folded paper from her purse. "I have permission. Daniel is co-executor of Robert's estate, remember? We're simply fulfilling our fiduciary responsibilities. Fiduciary responsibilities. Legal language wielded like a weapon. I looked at the men again. They weren't apologetic. They weren't uncomfortable. This was a job to them. They continued their systematic search, while I stood there, keys still in my hand, feeling like an intruder in my own home. The jewelry box is in the closet, Jennifer told them, pointing. Top shelf, behind the shoe boxes. She knew exactly where everything was. She'd been studying my house like a thief casing a target. One of the men climbed on a chair and retrieved the mahogany box Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. Inside were my engagement ring, my mother's pearls, the diamond earrings Robert surprised me with on our 40th anniversary. 40 years of love, reduced to items on an inventory list. The man opened the box without hesitation, without reverence. He photographed each piece with a professional camera, made notes on a tablet. "This is a decent collection," he said to Jennifer. "The diamonds are quality, the pearls are genuine. I'd estimate total value around $30,000. He just assigned a price to my memories." "Excellent," Jennifer said. "Make sure everything is thoroughly documented. We need a complete accounting." I found my voice again. "Stop. Please stop. Those are mine. This is my bedroom. You have no right." "Margaret," Jennifer interrupted, her voice sharp now, all pretense of sweetness gone. "Sit down. You're getting confused again. This is necessary legal work. The estate needs to be settled properly." "The estate is settled. Robert left everything to me." "Did he?" Jennifer raised one perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Are you certain about that? Because the documents at the lawyer's office tell a different story." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "We'll discuss it later. Right now, let these professionals finish their work. Why don't you go downstairs and make yourself some tea? You look pale." She was dismissing me from my own bedroom, in my own house. I should have fought, should have called the police, should have screamed until neighbors came running. But I was 72 years old, 6 months widowed, exhausted from grief, and completely unprepared for this level of calculated cruelty from my own family. So I retreated. I walked downstairs on shaking legs, left those strangers pawing through my most intimate belongings, and sat at my kitchen table trying to understand what was happening. Through the ceiling, I could hear their footsteps, drawers opening and closing, Jennifer's voice giving instructions, the systematic destruction of my privacy. An hour later, they came downstairs. The 3 men carried clipboards, filled with notes and photographs. Jennifer followed, completely composed, utterly satisfied. "We're finished for today," she announced. "But we'll need to come back next week to appraise the furniture and artwork. Some of these antiques could be quite valuable." "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me. Get out of my house, now." Jennifer laughed. Actually laughed. "Margaret, this isn't just your house anymore. Legally, Daniel has rights to this property. As his wife, so do I. You might want to familiarize yourself with the documents you signed at the lawyer's office. The ones you were so heavily medicated, you barely knew your own name." My blood turned to ice. "What documents?" "Oh, sweetheart." Jennifer's voice was pure poison, wrapped in fake concern. "Did you really think this house would stay yours forever? You're alone, you're elderly, you can barely take care of yourself. Daniel and I are simply ensuring the family assets are protected." She left then, herding the 3 strangers out like sheep, leaving me sitting at my kitchen table, alone, violated, and terrified. I sat there until darkness fell, until the house grew cold, until I could finally stand and lock the door she'd walked through with such casual cruelty. Then I climbed the stairs and looked at my bedroom. Everything had been touched. Nothing was where it belonged. My private sanctuary had been transformed into crime scene evidence. I sat on the bed I'd shared with Robert for 40 years, and tried not to cry, tried to be strong, tried to understand what Jennifer meant about documents and legal rights and medication. But the tears came anyway, silent tears that ran down my face and soaked into the bedspread. Robert used to wrap around my shoulders on cold mornings. I whispered to him, in the darkness, "Robert, what did I sign? What did I do?" But Robert was gone, and I was alone with the consequences of grief-blind trust. That evening, after I'd finally stopped shaking, after I'd checked every lock twice, after I'd hidden the mahogany jewelry box in a place Jennifer would never find, my phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. My son, the child I'd carried, birthed, raised, sacrificed everything to educate and support. Hello? My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Mom, Daniel said, and he sounded tired, defeated, but not apologetic. Jennifer told me you were upset about the appraisal today. Upset? Daniel, there were strangers going through my private belongings, in my bedroom, without my permission. Silence on the other end. Then, Mom, we talked about this. Remember, at the lawyer's office after Dad's funeral, we discussed estate planning and asset protection. I don't remember agreeing to strangers ransacking my home. Nobody ransacked anything. They were professional appraisers conducting a standard evaluation. This is normal procedure. Normal procedure, as if violation could be normalized with the right vocabulary. Daniel, I want Jennifer to return my house keys. Immediately. Another pause. Longer this time. Mom, that's not going to happen. Look, can we meet tomorrow? You and me? I think we need to have a serious conversation about your situation. My situation. As if I were the problem. As if my legitimate outrage were a symptom of decline. What situation would that be? I asked, my voice ice. Mom, please. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'll come by tomorrow evening. We'll talk then. He hung up before I could respond, just disconnected, leaving me holding the phone, staring at the dark screen, wondering when my son had become a stranger. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across the walls, trying to piece together memories from the lawyer's office 6 months ago. I'd been sedated. The doctor had prescribed something to help me through the funeral, through those unbearable first weeks. I'd taken the pills because I couldn't function without them, couldn't breathe through the crushing weight of loss. I remembered sitting in the lawyer's office, documents spread across the desk, words blurring together. Daniel had been there. Jennifer too. The lawyer, what was his name? Had explained something about trusts and provisions and contingencies. I'd signed papers because Daniel told me to sign, because I trusted my son, because I was too broken to question anything. What had I signed? What had I given away while grief rendered me helpless? I confronted Jennifer and Daniel the next evening when they arrived together. I'd spent the day preparing, reviewing bank statements, searching through files for copies of documents from Robert's estate. I'd found some papers, but not everything. Not the documents Jennifer had mentioned. They sat on my living room couch, my couch, in my house, like they owned the space. Jennifer crossed her legs, perfectly composed. Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. Thank you for seeing us, Margaret, Jennifer began, as if I'd invited them rather than demanded answers. Show me the documents, I interrupted. Show me what I supposedly signed. Jennifer produced a leather folder from her designer handbag. She opened it with exaggerated care, pulled out several papers, and spread them on the coffee table like playing cards. This, she pointed to the first document, is Robert's will. As you can see, everything was left to you, with Daniel named as contingent beneficiary. I nodded. I knew this part. However, Jennifer continued, her manicured fingernail moving to the next page. This clause here, which you signed and initialed, includes a provision. If you become unable to maintain the property due to age, illness, or incapacity, ownership transfers to Daniel and me. For your protection, of course. My hand started shaking. I never agreed to that. Your signature and initials say otherwise. Jennifer pointed to the bottom of the page. My signature, my initials, written in the shaky handwriting of a woman drowning in grief and medication. I was heavily sedated when I signed those papers. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. The lawyer explained everything thoroughly, Jennifer said, her voice dripping false sympathy. You said you understood. You even asked questions about the provision. That was a lie. I hadn't asked questions. I'd barely been conscious. This is fraud, I whispered. This is protection, Jennifer corrected. Margaret, look at yourself. You can barely manage this house. The garden is overgrown. You forget appointments. Last week you left the stove on for 3 hours. The smoke detector batteries were dead because you hadn't replaced them. You're declining mentally, and it's not safe for you to live alone in a property this large. Every accusation hit like a physical blow. Some of them were true. I had forgotten appointments, had neglected the garden, had left the stove on once. But these weren't signs of mental decline. These were signs of grief, of loss, of a woman trying to survive the death of her soulmate. You're exaggerating isolated incidents to justify stealing my home, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. We're not stealing anything. We're fulfilling the legal provisions you agreed to. Jennifer pulled out another folder. This contains documentation we've been compiling over the past 6 months. Photographs of the overgrown yard, expired food in your refrigerator, unpaid bills, medical appointment reminders you've ignored, text messages where you've seemed confused about dates and times. She spread photographs across the coffee table. Evidence of my decline. Proof of my incompetence. A carefully constructed case that I was no longer capable of managing my own life. Some of the photographs looked staged. The expired milk in the fridge. I'd thrown that out weeks ago. The unpaid bills. I'd paid those on time. But there they were, documented, time-stamped, presented as fact. You manufactured this evidence, I said. We documented reality, Jennifer replied smoothly. Margaret, this isn't personal. This is about protecting family assets and ensuring you receive proper care. Daniel and I have already consulted with an elder care attorney. We're prepared to file for guardianship if necessary. Guardianship. The word landed like a tombstone. Guardianship meant losing control of my finances, my property, my decisions. It meant becoming a legal child, subject to someone else's authority. It meant Jennifer would have complete power over everything Robert and I had built. I looked at Daniel, who'd remained silent through this entire presentation. My son. My only child in this country, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, nursed through fevers, cheered at soccer games, put through college. Daniel, I said quietly. Look at me. He raised his eyes. They were filled with something that might have been guilt, might have been shame, but wasn't strong enough to be called courage. Is this what you want? I asked. To take away your mother's home? To declare her incompetent? To let your wife terrorize me in my own house? Mom, his voice cracked. You're not getting any younger. We're trying to help. The house is too much for you. You'd be happier in a smaller place. Maybe an assisted living community where you'd have support and companionship. I don't need assisted living. I need my family to stop trying to steal my home. See, Jennifer interjected. This kind of paranoid thinking is exactly what we're talking about. Nobody is stealing anything, Margaret. We're family. We're trying to help you. She stood, smoothing her expensive skirt. You have 2 choices. Sign the house over to us voluntarily, with a provision allowing you to remain here as long as you're capable. Or we file for guardianship, prove you're incompetent to manage your affairs, and the court gives us authority anyway. Either way, Daniel and I are moving in next month. We're selling our rental property and combining households. It makes financial sense. The truth landed with brutal clarity. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about Jennifer wanting my house, my beautiful 4-bedroom home in an appreciating neighborhood, my equity, my space, my life. They left me sitting alone in my living room, surrounded by fabricated evidence of my decline, with an ultimatum that felt like a noose tightening around my neck. I sat there until midnight, trying to understand how my life had come to this, how my son's wedding had led to this nightmare, how grief had made me vulnerable to this carefully planned destruction. Then I stood, walked to Robert's study, and turned on the light. If they wanted war, I'd give them war. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was fighting. I spent that sleepless night in Robert's study, surrounded by 40 years of memories. His books lined the shelves, history, philosophy, biographies of men who'd built things and defended principles. His reading glasses sat on the desk where he'd left them the morning he died. His favorite pen, his leather chair that still smelled faintly of his cologne. I'd avoided this room for 6 months. It hurt too much to be here, surrounded by his presence, reminded of his absence. But tonight, I needed him, needed his wisdom, needed whatever guidance he might have left behind. I started searching through his desk drawers. Files, tax returns, insurance policies, letters from friends. And then, in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath folders of old photographs, I found Robert's journals. He'd kept them for years, private thoughts he'd never shared. I'd known about them but never read them. They were his sanctuary, his private space, and I'd respected that boundary even in his death. Tonight, I opened them. His handwriting filled page after page. Reflections on our marriage, thoughts about Daniel's childhood, observations about life and aging, and the passage of time. I read through years of entries, tears streaming down my face, hearing his voice in every word. Then I reached the final year, the entries from the months before his death, and everything changed. Robert had known he was dying, the heart condition the doctors discovered too late. He'd suspected it for months. He'd been planning, preparing, trying to protect me. March 15th, consulted with Harrison Webb today about revising the estate documents. Something about Jennifer troubles me. Can't put my finger on it exactly, but Margaret's too trusting. I need to create additional protections, maybe a separate trust that Jennifer and Daniel can't access. Harrison suggested several options. We'll meet again next week. March 22nd. Daniel came by today and convinced me to simplify the estate planning. Said complex trusts would create tax problems and legal headaches for Margaret. He seemed so earnest, so concerned. I let him talk me into keeping things simple. God, I hope I didn't just make a terrible mistake. April 3rd. Jennifer stopped by while Margaret was at her book club. Asked very specific questions about the property deed, about inheritance laws, about provisions for elderly care. The questions felt wrong, calculated. I tried calling Harrison but couldn't reach him. Need to schedule another meeting soon. April 18th. Chest pains worse today. Margaret doesn't know. Don't want to worry her, but I'm running out of time to fix the estate documents. Harrison finally called back. We're meeting next Tuesday. I need to protect Margaret. Jennifer's influence over Daniel worries me more every day. The entry stopped there. Robert died on April 20th, 2 days before his meeting with Harrison Webb. He'd tried to protect me. He'd seen what I'd been too naive to recognize, and he died before he could finish what he'd started. But there was more. Clipped to the inside back cover of the journal, I found a sealed envelope, my name written across the front in Robert's distinctive handwriting. My hands shook so violently I could barely open it. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray my fears were unfounded. But if anything seems wrong after my death, if Daniel or Jennifer pressure you about the house, if you feel confused by legal documents, if you sense something isn't right, please immediately contact Harrison Webb. His number is 555 Mickey 0147. He's been my attorney and friend for 30 years. He knows my wishes. He'll protect you. I'm worried I made a mistake by listening to Daniel about the estate planning. Jennifer has been asking too many questions, making too many comments about this house being too large for us. Your instincts about her were right. My love, mine were slow to catch up. If I don't make it to that meeting with Harrison, if something happens before I can fix the documents, promise me you'll call him. Promise me you'll fight for what we built together. You're stronger than you know, Margaret. Stronger than you believe. I love you. I've loved you since the day we met, and wherever I am, I'm still loving you. Yours always, Robert. I held that letter against my chest and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the core of my being. Robert had seen the trap. He'd tried to warn me. He'd left me a lifeline. And I'd been too buried in grief to notice. But I noticed now. I found my address book, the actual paper one, because I'd never fully trusted cell phones, and looked up contacts. Half the numbers I tried were disconnected. Friends who'd moved away or passed on, neighbors I'd lost touch with. I realized with growing horror that I'd become isolated over the past 6 months. My weekly coffee dates with Francis had stopped. When had that happened? My book club meetings. I hadn't attended in months. My standing hair appointment canceled. But I thought I'd done those things myself. choosing solitude in my grief. But now I wondered, had Jennifer been canceling appointments? Had she been telling people I preferred privacy? Had she been systematically cutting me off from my support network, leaving me vulnerable and alone? My old cell phone bill. I searched through papers until I found it. The number had been changed 4 months ago. To reduce spam calls, Jennifer had told me. To isolate me, she'd meant. I was in a cage I hadn't recognized was being built around me. But Robert had left me the key. Harrison Webb, attorney at law, friend, protector. I looked at the clock, 3 in the morning, too late to call. But at 9 o'clock, the moment business hours began, I'd dial that number. I spent the remaining hours reading through more of Robert's journals, understanding the man I'd loved, seeing his fears and hopes and final attempts to shield me from what he'd sensed coming. "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner," I whispered to the empty room. "But I'm listening now, my love, and I'm going to finish what you started." When dawn broke through the study windows, I was still sitting in Robert's chair, surrounded by evidence of his love, armed with his final gift. A name, a number, a chance. At exactly 9 o'clock, I dialed 555 NANT 0147. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "Webb and Associates, how may I help you?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Margaret Whitmore. I need to speak with Harrison Webb. It's urgent. Tell him it's about Robert Whitmore's widow. Tell him I need his help." "One moment, please." Classical music played while I waited, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then a different voice. Older, warm, concerned. "Margaret? My God, Margaret. I've been hoping you'd call. This is Harrison. I am so sorry about Robert. Are you all right? What's happened?" And then, sitting in my late husband's study, surrounded by his journals and his love, I told Harrison Webb everything. I met Harrison Webb at a small diner, 30 miles from my home, taking elaborate precautions Jennifer would have found laughable if she'd known. I told no one where I was going. I borrowed my neighbor Betty's car, the first person I'd confided in, an 80-year-old widow who understood isolation when she saw it. I took side roads and watched my mirrors like I was in a spy thriller. It felt absurd and necessary in equal measure. Harrison was waiting in a corner booth. When I arrived, he stood when he saw me, a tall, silver-haired gentleman in his late 70s, wearing a gray suit that spoke of quiet authority. His eyes were kind but sharp, missing nothing. "Margaret," he took both my hands in his. "Thank you for reaching out. Please, sit." We sat across from each other, and suddenly I didn't know where to start. "How do you explain that your family is trying to steal your life?" "I found Robert's journals," I began, "and his letter. He asked me to contact you if anything seemed wrong." Harrison's expression darkened. "Something is wrong, isn't it?" I told him everything. The strangers in my bedroom, Jennifer's fabricated evidence, the documents I'd signed while medicated, the guardianship threat, the ultimatum. Every humiliating, terrifying detail spilled out while Harrison took notes in a leather notebook, his pen moving quickly, his face growing grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Margaret, Robert contacted me 2 weeks before he died. He wanted to revise the estate documents, create additional protections for you. He was worried about Jennifer's influence over Daniel, but he passed before we could meet." The confirmation hurt even though I'd expected it. "So the documents I signed are likely different from what Robert intended," Harrison finished. "May I see them?" I pulled out copies I'd made that morning, my hands shaking slightly as I slid them across the table. Harrison read through each page carefully, his frown deepening. Finally, he looked up. "This is worse than I thought. The guardianship petition is based entirely on fabricated evidence, but it's professionally constructed. If you don't fight back immediately, if Jennifer gets in front of a sympathetic judge, she could win." "How is that possible?" "I'm not incompetent. The standard for guardianship is surprisingly low. If they can demonstrate you're unable to manage your affairs, even temporarily, even due to grief, a court can grant conservatorship. And Jennifer has been building this case methodically. The photographs, the witness statements, even the medical evaluation. She's been planning this for at least a year, possibly longer. A year. While I'd been welcoming her into my home, trusting her with keys and private information, she'd been planning my destruction. Can you help me? I asked quietly. Yes. But Margaret, you need to understand what fighting this means. If we go to court, if we expose Jennifer's manipulation and fraud, your relationship with Daniel may not survive. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my son, the child I'd raised, the man who'd stood silent while strangers ransacked my bedroom, the husband who'd let his wife terrorize his grieving mother. That relationship died the day he let strangers tear through my bedroom, I said, my voice steady. Whatever comes next, I need to protect what Robert and I built. That's what matters now. Harrison nodded. Then we fight, but we need to be strategic. First, I'm hiring a private investigator to document your actual competence and to dig into Jennifer's background. I have a feeling there's more to this story. He pulled out his phone and made a call. 5 minutes later, he'd arranged for someone named Sarah Chen to meet us within the hour. Sarah is the best investigator in the state, Harrison explained. She specializes in elder abuse cases. If Jennifer has been planning this, Sarah will find the evidence. Sarah Chen arrived 40 minutes later, a sharp-featured woman in her early 40s, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to my story without interruption, taking her own notes, asking occasional clarifying questions. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, when I'd finished, with your permission, I'd like to shadow you for the next 2 weeks. Document your daily activities, your cognitive function, your ability to manage your affairs. We need to prove you're fully competent, despite Jennifer's manufactured evidence. Of course, I agreed. I'm also going to investigate Jennifer and this Marcus person she's been meeting. Financial records, property records, phone records if possible. If she's running a long-term con, there will be traces. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah became my invisible companion. She documented me grocery shopping, calculating change, navigating conversations. She recorded me volunteering at church, managing my budget, attending appointments I scheduled myself. The evidence proved what I already knew. I was fully capable, fully competent, fully present. But Sarah found something else too, something neither Harrison nor I had expected. Jennifer maintained a second residence, a luxury apartment across town, expensively furnished, paid for with credit cards in my name. Credit cards Jennifer had opened using my information, running up debt, then paying it off to establish a pattern of financial confusion she could use as evidence of my declining capacity. And Jennifer wasn't living there alone. The man named Marcus, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend from before her marriage to Daniel, had never left her life. The relationship had continued throughout her entire marriage. Sarah showed me photographs. Jennifer and Marcus entering the apartment together. Jennifer and Marcus at expensive restaurants. Jennifer and Marcus in intimate embraces that made my stomach turn. My son had no idea his wife was living a double life. There's more, Sarah said grimly. I recorded a conversation between Jennifer and Marcus at the apartment. You need to hear this. She played the audio file, Jennifer's voice, cold and calculating, discussing their future plans. Once we get the house, we'll give it 6 months, maybe a year. Then I'll divorce Daniel, we'll sell the property, split the proceeds, he'll get half, but we'll have already moved the valuable assets before the divorce filing. The old woman will probably die within a year anyway, so we won't have to deal with her long term. Marcus's voice, and Daniel won't suspect. Jennifer laughed. Actually laughed. Daniel suspects nothing. He's too weak, too guilty about his father dying. I've convinced him his mother is declining. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. The recording continued, detailing how Jennifer planned to maximize the property value, which renovations would bring the best return, how they'd furnish their space once Margaret was gone. I listened to my daughter-in-law casually discuss waiting for my death, like it was an anticipated business transaction. Listened to her dismiss my son as weak and manipulable. Listened to her plot the theft of everything Robert had built. When the recording ended, I sat in silence, processing the depth of her betrayal. This is elder financial abuse, Harrison said quietly. This is fraud, identity theft, and potentially conspiracy. Jennifer isn't just trying to take your house, Margaret. She's been systematically stealing your identity, destroying your reputation, isolating you from support, all while conducting an affair and planning to divorce your son once she's secured the assets. She's been very, very careful, but she's also been very, very greedy. What do we do? I asked. We use her arrogance against her, Harrison replied. We let her think she's winning. We let her commit fully to her lies. And then when she's under oath in front of a judge, we destroy her credibility completely. Sarah leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, this is going to get harder before it gets better. Jennifer will escalate. She'll stage more incidents to prove your incompetence. You'll need to document everything, record everything when possible, and most importantly, you cannot let Jennifer know we're investigating her. I understand, I said. There's one more thing, Harrison added gently. Daniel is as much a victim here as you are. Jennifer has been manipulating him, exploiting his guilt over Robert's death. When this comes out, when he learns the truth, it's going to devastate him. I thought about my son, my weak, confused, betrayed son. Maybe that devastation will wake him up, I said quietly. Maybe losing everything will teach him what matters. Harrison and Sarah exchanged glances. Then Harrison said, then we proceed. But Margaret, you need to be prepared. This isn't just about your house anymore. This is about exposing Jennifer's entire scheme. And when we're done, she won't just lose the guardianship case. She'll face criminal charges. For the first time in 6 months, I felt something other than grief and fear. I felt purpose. I felt Robert's presence, guiding me, protecting me even from beyond whatever veil separated us. Let's finish what Robert started, I said. Let's protect what we built, and let's make sure Jennifer pays for every minute of suffering she's caused. Harrison smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who just found worthy prey. Then let's get to work. I returned home that evening with a small recording device Sarah had given me, concealed in a button on my cardigan. Document everything, she'd instructed. Every conversation with Jennifer, every incident she stages, everything. Playing the role of declining, confused elderly widow was harder than I'd expected. It required me to be less than I was, to fumble with simple tasks, to forget obvious things. But I discovered I was a better actress than I'd known. Jennifer grew bolder, more careless, more openly cruel. She brought Marcus to the house when she thought I was napping, discussing their plans in my kitchen. I recorded it all. She staged another incident, claiming I'd left the oven on overnight, calling the fire department, making a public spectacle. But Sarah had installed hidden cameras, and we had footage proving Jennifer had turned the oven on herself, then called emergency services. She scheduled another medical evaluation with a different doctor. Dr. Philip Morrison, known for conservative diagnoses regarding elderly independence. The examination was humiliating. Dr. Morrison asked me questions like I was a child, interrupted my answers, made notes while shaking his head sadly. Jennifer sat in the corner during the entire evaluation, her presence a constant pressure, occasionally interjecting with examples of my confusion that were either exaggerated or completely fabricated. She thought it was Tuesday last week when it was actually Thursday, Jennifer said with feigned concern. She's been calling Daniel by her late husband's name. She left the refrigerator door open for 6 hours. All lies, but Dr. Morrison wrote them down. The evaluation ended with Dr. Morrison's grim assessment. Mrs. Whitmore shows signs of moderate cognitive decline. I would recommend supervised living arrangements and assistance with daily activities. I left that office feeling like I'd been violated all over again. But the recording device captured everything. Jennifer's coached responses, Morrison's leading questions, the entire theatrical performance designed to paint me as incompetent. That evening, Daniel visited alone. A rare occurrence, he seemed troubled, uncertain, hovering in the doorway, like he wasn't sure he was welcome in the house where he'd grown up. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I almost broke character, almost grabbed him and told him everything about Jennifer's affair, about the apartment, about the plot to destroy us both. But Harrison's words echoed, "Not yet. Let Jennifer commit fully. Let her believe she's winning." "Of course, sweetheart," I said instead, playing the confused elderly mother. "Come in." Would you like tea? Or is it coffee you prefer? I forget. Pain flickered across Daniel's face. Tea is fine, Mom. We sat at the kitchen table, where I'd fed him countless childhood meals, where Robert and I had discussed our days over dinner, where Jennifer had stood with Marcus, plotting my destruction. Mom, I need to ask you something, Daniel began, his hands wrapped around the teacup, like he needed its warmth. Are you really having trouble managing things? Or is Jennifer exaggerating? My heart leapt. This was the opening. This was Daniel starting to question. But I couldn't push too hard. Not yet. I forget things sometimes, I admitted. Since your father died, some days are harder than others. But I'm managing, Daniel. I'm not ready to give up my independence. Jennifer says the house is too much for you, that you'd be happier somewhere smaller, with support nearby. What do you think, Daniel? You know me better than Jennifer does. Do I seem incompetent to you? He looked at me, really looked, and I saw the war happening behind his eyes, his wife's constant narrative versus the evidence of his own observations, his guilt over Robert's death versus his loyalty to the mother who'd raised him. I don't know, Mom, he finally whispered. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then he asked me about his childhood, about specific memories, about the time I'd sat with him through pneumonia, reading stories until my voice gave out, about the science fair project we'd built together when his father was deployed, about the conversation we'd had before his wedding, when I'd asked if he was certain about Jennifer. You were right, he said suddenly. What you said before the wedding. You asked if I was sure. You saw something I didn't want to see. What did I see, Daniel? That she loves things more than people, that she calculates value in everything, that he stopped, unable to finish the thought. That she doesn't love you, I finished gently. He flinched like I'd struck him. I should go. Daniel, wait. But he was already standing, already leaving, running from truths he wasn't ready to face. I watched him go, my son, my trapped and manipulated child, and I wanted to scream, wanted to shake him, wanted to force him to see what was happening. But Harrison was right. Daniel needed to discover the truth himself, needed to hear Jennifer's own words, in her own voice, admitting her plans. Only then would he believe. Only then would he break free. So I let him go, and I continued playing my role. The confused widow, the declining mother, the easy target. While Sarah Chen compiled evidence that would burn Jennifer's entire world down, I watched my home being transformed into Jennifer's space and said nothing, endured the violation, recorded everything. Daniel came by occasionally, always uncomfortable, always avoiding extended conversation. He was seeing what was happening, but couldn't reconcile it with Jennifer's narrative. Cognitive dissonance kept him paralyzed. Jennifer grew bolder. She invited Marcus to dinner, actually invited her lover into my home, introduced him as a friend helping with the estate planning. I served them pot roast in my dining room and pretended not to notice their intimate glances, their secret smiles. Marcus was charming, smooth, utterly fake. He complimented the house, asked questions about property values, discussed the real estate market like he was already planning the sale. After they left, I stood in my kitchen, Robert's kitchen, my kitchen, and pressed my forehead against the refrigerator, breathing deeply, fighting the urge to scream. The recording device captured it all. Jennifer and Marcus discussing which rooms they'd renovate first, which furniture was valuable enough to keep, how quickly they could sell once they had full ownership. The old woman plays her part beautifully, Jennifer had said with a laugh. She's so lost in grief. She doesn't see anything happening around her. If she only knew. Sarah completed her investigation 2 weeks before the hearing. The dossier she compiled was devastating. Jennifer's secret apartment, documented with photographs and lease agreements in my name. The affair with Marcus, captured in dozens of images and videos. The credit card fraud, proven through statements and spending patterns. The coached witnesses, exposed through Sarah's interviews. The manufactured evidence, debunked through timestamps and contradictory documentation. But the most damning evidence came from the surveillance of Jennifer's apartment. Sarah had installed listening devices, legally questionable, but admissible if Jennifer's crimes were proven first. and captured weeks of conversations between Jennifer and Marcus. They discussed not just stealing my house, but how to accelerate my decline, whether certain medications could be added to my food to create genuine confusion, how to isolate me further from any remaining friends or support. We need to be patient. Marcus's voice on the recording said, 6 more months, maybe a year. Once we have full guardianship, we control everything, her assets, her medical care, her living situation. Then it's just a matter of time before nature takes its course. Or we help nature along. The implication was clear. They weren't just planning to steal my house, they were planning to end my life once they had legal control. They want me dead, I said quietly. Yes, Harrison replied, equally quiet. This isn't just elder abuse, Margaret. This is conspiracy to commit murder, or at minimum, criminally negligent homicide. Jennifer has crossed from greed into something far darker. What do? We let her walk into court, believing she's won. We let her commit perjury under oath. Then we present every piece of evidence, destroy her credibility completely, and watch the criminal investigation begin. Sarah leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, you need to know when this comes out, it's going to be public, possibly media coverage. Your privacy will be invaded. Jennifer will likely face serious charges. And Daniel is going to learn his wife has been planning his mother's death. I know, I said. But I'm done being quiet. I'm done being the polite elderly widow who accepts violation because confrontation is uncomfortable. Robert tried to warn me. He tried to protect me. Now I'm going to finish what he started. I underwent one final evaluation with Dr. Amelia Santos, an independent neurologist Sarah recommended. Dr. Santos was thorough, spending 3 hours testing my cognitive function, my memory, my decision-making capacity. Her conclusion: Mrs. Whitmore demonstrates completely normal cognitive function for her age. There is no evidence of dementia, significant memory impairment, or decision-making incapacity. She is fully capable of managing her own affairs. Dr. Santos was appalled when Harrison showed her Dr. Morrison's assessment. This is either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud, she stated. I'd be willing to testify to that effect. The pieces were in place. The evidence compiled. The trap set. The night before the hearing, Daniel appeared at my door. His face was pale, his hands shaking. Mom, he said, his voice breaking. I think I've made a terrible mistake. I wanted to pull him inside, wanted to show him everything, wanted to save him from the devastation coming tomorrow. But Harrison's final instruction echoed. Let it happen in court. Let Jennifer commit. Let Daniel hear everything from the judge. Come inside, sweetheart, I said instead. Tell me what's wrong. But before Daniel could speak, Jennifer's car pulled into the driveway. She'd been following him, checking on him, controlling him, even now. Daniel, she called from the car. We need to go. We have final preparations for tomorrow. Daniel looked at me, conflict and confusion and dawning horror in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I'm so sorry. Then he left, following Jennifer, trapped in her web for one more night. I stood in my doorway watching them drive away, knowing tomorrow would shatter everything. I dressed in my finest clothes the next morning. Robert's wedding ring on a chain around my neck. My mother's pearls, the navy suit I'd worn to Robert's funeral, now worn for a different kind of ending. I stood in my bedroom, the room Jennifer's people had ransacked, the sanctuary that had been violated, and I spoke to Robert's photograph. Today, my love, I whispered, we fight back. Today we protect what we built. Today we finish this. Then I drove to the courthouse with Harrison, ready for war. The courtroom was small, sterile, filled with harsh fluorescent light that made everything look washed out and cold. Judge Patricia Hendricks presided, a stern woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd heard every lie and seen every manipulation the legal system had to offer. Jennifer sat beside her attorney, Richard Vance, a slick corporate lawyer in an expensive suit. She looked perfect, composed, every inch the concerned daughter-in-law, trying to help her declining mother-in-law. She dressed in soft colors, styled her hair conservatively, even wore minimal makeup, the costume of caring. Daniel sat behind them, unable to meet my eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept. Good. Maybe sleepless nights were the beginning of conscience. I sat beside Harrison at the defense table, my hands folded, my spine straight, my face calm. Jennifer glanced at me once with something like pity. She thought she'd already won. Judge Hendricks called the hearing to order. We're here regarding a petition for guardianship of Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, filed by Jennifer Whitmore on behalf of her husband Daniel Whitmore, who would serve as guardian. Let's begin. Harrison stood. Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to establish Mrs. Margaret Whitmore's actual cognitive and functional capacity through independent expert testimony. Judge Hendricks nodded. Proceed. Dr. Amelia Santos took the stand, impressive in her credentials and devastating in her testimony. She described the comprehensive evaluation she'd conducted, the testing protocols, the clear results. Mrs. Whitmore demonstrates completely normal cognitive function for her age. Dr. Santos stated clearly, her memory, decision-making capacity, and ability to manage her affairs are all intact. There is absolutely no medical basis for guardianship. Richard Vance cross-examined aggressively, trying to undermine her credentials, her testing methods, her conclusions. But Dr. Santos was unshakable. She'd evaluated thousands of patients. Her assessments were gold standard. Her reputation was impeccable. But Dr. Santos, Vance pressed, isn't it true that elderly individuals can have good days and bad days? That someone might perform well in a controlled testing environment but struggle in daily life? That can be true in cases of genuine cognitive decline, Dr. Santos replied. But Mrs. Whitmore shows no evidence of decline. She's functioning normally. Next, Sarah Chen testified, presenting weeks of documented evidence, Margaret grocery shopping, calculating change, navigating complex conversations, managing appointments, volunteering at church. The surveillance footage painted a picture of a fully functional, fully competent woman. Vance tried to dismiss it as selective documentation, but Judge Hendricks was paying close attention, taking detailed notes. Then Vance presented Jennifer's case. He called Dr. Philip Morrison to the stand. Morrison testified about the evaluation he'd conducted, about Margaret's confusion, her inappropriate responses, her concerning forgetfulness. In your professional opinion, Dr. Morrison, is Mrs. Whitmore capable of managing her own affairs? Vance asked. I have serious concerns about her capacity, Morrison replied. Based on my evaluation and the background information provided by Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore, I believe supervised living arrangements would be appropriate. Harrison's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Morrison, how long did you spend evaluating Mrs. Whitmore? Approximately 30 minutes. And was anyone else present during this evaluation? Yes, Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore was present at her request. Did you conduct any independent verification of the background information Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore provided? Morrison hesitated. I relied on the information provided by the family member. So you based your professional assessment on 30 minutes of observation and uncorroborated claims made by the person who would directly benefit from a diagnosis of incompetence. That's not how I would characterize it. How would you characterize it, Dr. Morrison? The doctor grew defensive, and Judge Hendricks leaned forward, clearly interested in his answer. Harrison continued, Dr. Morrison, have you received any payments from Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore outside of the standard evaluation fee? Vance objected immediately, but Judge Hendricks overruled. Answer the question, Dr. Morrison. Morrison's face flushed. Mrs. Whitmore paid me a consulting fee for advice regarding her mother-in-law's care. How much was this consulting fee? $5,000. The courtroom fell silent. Harrison let that number hang in the air. No further questions, Your Honor. Vance called the neighbors Jennifer had coached, but under Harrison's questioning, they admitted they rarely saw Margaret, that their concerns came primarily from Jennifer's reports, that they had no first-hand knowledge of any actual problems. The case was weakening. Jennifer's perfect facade was developing cracks. Then Vance called his final witness. Your Honor, I'd like to call Daniel Whitmore to the stand. Daniel stood slowly, reluctantly, like a man walking toward his own execution. He took the oath, sat down, and finally, looked at me. What he saw in my eyes made him flinch. Mr. Whitmore, Vance began, Can you describe your mother's decline over the past 6 months? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Jennifer, who leaned forward, her expression encouraging, confident. Then Daniel looked at Judge Hendricks. Your Honor, I need to tell the truth about what's really happening in that house. Jennifer's face went white. Vance froze. Harrison remained perfectly still. A predator watching its prey realized the trap had sprung. Go on, Mr. Whitmore, Judge Hendricks said quietly. And my son, my weak, manipulated, finally awakening son, began to confess. Daniel's voice broke as he spoke, but the words kept coming, like a dam finally bursting after months of pressure. My mother isn't declining, he said. She never was. My wife Jennifer orchestrated everything. The manufactured evidence, the coached witnesses, the medical evaluation. She planned it all. Jennifer grabbed Vance's arm, whispering furiously. Vance tried to object, but Judge Hendricks silenced him with a gesture. Mr. Whitmore, these are serious allegations, the judge said. Can you provide specifics? Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. Jennifer convinced me that Mom couldn't handle the house, that she was confused and forgetting things. She showed me photographs, told me stories about incidents that I never actually witnessed. She said we needed to step in, that it was our responsibility as family. But you came to doubt this narrative. Harrison prompted gently. Yes. Over the past few weeks, I started noticing things didn't add up. Mom seemed fine when I visited alone. Clear, coherent, capable. But Jennifer kept insisting she was declining, kept showing me more evidence. I started to wonder where all this evidence was coming from, why I never saw these problems myself. What changed, Mr. Whitmore? Daniel took a shaking breath. 3 days ago, I followed Jennifer when she said she was going to a friend's house. She didn't go to a friend's house. She went to a luxury apartment I didn't know existed, and a man was waiting for her. A man named Marcus. Jennifer stood up. That's a lie. Daniel, what are you? Sit down, Mrs. Whitmore. Judge Hendricks ordered, her voice sharp. Continue, Mr. Whitmore. I recognized Marcus from old photographs in Jennifer's things. He was her boyfriend before we met. She'd told me they'd broken up years ago, but they never broke up. She's been seeing him our entire marriage. Daniel's hands clenched on the witness stand rail. I watched them together. They were intimate, and they were talking about my mother's house, about selling it, about splitting the money, about divorcing me, once they had the property. Did you confront your wife about this? Harrison asked. No, I was in shock. I didn't know what to do, so I started looking through Jennifer's things. Her phone, her computer, her files. I found lease agreements for that apartment, in my mother's name. Credit card statements I'd never seen, communications with real estate agents about selling my mother's house before we even had legal ownership. Daniel looked directly at Jennifer now, and his voice hardened. I found recordings of you and Marcus discussing how to make Mom seem more confused, how to isolate her from her friends, how to manufacture evidence, and I found something else. He pulled out his phone, held it up. I found this conversation from 2 weeks ago. Harrison took the phone, verified its authenticity with Daniel, then asked Judge Hendricks for permission to play the audio. The judge agreed. The courtroom listened in absolute silence as Jennifer and Marcus's voices filled the space, discussing Margaret's house, their plans, and then the most damning moment, Marcus asking about accelerating the timeline. Jennifer's voice, cold and calculating, we need to be patient. 6 more months, maybe a year. Once we have full guardianship, we control everything. Then it's just a matter of time before nature takes its course, or we help nature along. The recording ended. The silence was deafening. Judge Hendricks's face had gone from stern to furious. Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore, did you just hear yourself discussing harming Mrs. Margaret Whitmore? Jennifer had lost all composure. That's out of context. We were just talking hypothetically. Daniel, you're misunderstanding. I understand perfectly now, Daniel said, his voice hollow. You married me to get to my mother's house. You never loved me. You've been planning this for years, and you were willing to hurt my mother, maybe even kill her, to get what you wanted. Harrison stood. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to present additional evidence compiled by our investigator, Miss Sarah Chen. For the next hour, the courtroom became a gallery of Jennifer's crimes. Sarah's photographs of the secret apartment, credit card statements showing fraud, documented conversations with Marcus, coached witness statements with timestamps proving coordination, the connection between Jennifer and Dr. Morrison's consulting fee. Every piece of evidence Harrison had held back, waiting for this moment, now entered the record. The appraisers who'd ransacked my bedroom weren't professionals, they were Jennifer's cousin and his friends, conducting a theatrical performance designed to intimidate. The incidents Jennifer had reported, the stove left on, the expired food, the unpaid bills, were either fabricated or staged by Jennifer herself. Sarah had footage proving Jennifer had turned on my stove, then called the fire department, had planted expired food in my refrigerator, then photographed it, had intercepted and hidden bills to create false evidence of my confusion. Richard Vance tried to object, tried to call for recesses, tried to protect his client, but there was no protecting Jennifer from the avalanche of evidence burying her. Judge Hendricks called a 30-minute recess. "I need time to process what I've just heard and seen," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. During the recess, Jennifer tried to approach Daniel. He turned away. She tried to leave the courthouse. Sarah Chen blocked her exit with 2 security guards. Harrison had arranged in advance. "You're not going anywhere," Sarah said quietly. I sat in the hallway with Harrison, drinking water, trying to process what had just happened. My son had saved me. At the last possible moment, Daniel had found his courage and saved me. "He's going to need therapy," I said quietly. "Professional help processing what Jennifer did to him." "Probably," Harrison agreed. "But Margaret, he did the right thing in the end. That counts for something." "Does it count enough?" Harrison looked at me with compassion. "That's something only you can decide." Judge Hendricks returned exactly 30 minutes later. The courtroom reconvened. Everyone stood as she entered, then sat at her gesture. The judge looked at Jennifer with undisguised contempt. Then she began her ruling. Judge Hendricks's voice was ice as she spoke. "I have presided over guardianship cases for over 20 years. I have seen family dysfunction, financial desperation, and complicated elder care situations. But I have never seen anything approaching the calculated cruelty and systematic fraud demonstrated in this case." Jennifer sat frozen, all color drained from her face. "The petition for guardianship is denied in its entirety," Judge Hendricks continued. "The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Mrs. Margaret Whitmore is fully competent, fully capable of managing her affairs, and has been the victim of an elaborate scheme to rob her of her home, her independence, and potentially her life." The judge's gaze bore into Jennifer. "Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore, your actions constitute elder financial abuse, identity theft, fraud, and based on the recorded conversation presented today, potentially conspiracy to commit harm or murder. I am immediately referring this case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." Vance tried to speak. Judge Hendricks silenced him with a raised hand. "I am issuing a restraining order, preventing Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore from contacting Mrs. Margaret Whitmore or entering her property for any reason. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place pending criminal proceedings. Furthermore, I am ordering Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore to make full restitution for all fraudulently obtained funds, including credit card debt, the apartment lease payments, and Dr. Morrison's consulting fee, with interest calculated from the date of each fraudulent transaction." Judge Hendricks looked directly at Dr. Morrison, who'd remained in the courtroom. "Dr. Morrison, I am reporting your conduct to the State Medical Board. Your evaluation was either grossly incompetent or deliberately fraudulent. Either way, you have violated your professional obligations and potentially contributed to the abuse of a vulnerable elder." Then the judge turned to me. Her expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize on behalf of a system that should have protected you, but instead allowed this abuse to proceed as far as it did. You have demonstrated remarkable strength and courage in fighting back. Your home remains yours. Your independence remains yours. No one can take that from you." I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion closing my throat. "This hearing is concluded. Bailiff, please ensure Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore remains available for law enforcement contact. The gavel fell. The courtroom erupted in quiet chaos. Vance gathered his papers, already planning his defense strategy. Sarah Chen was on her phone, coordinating with the district attorney's office. Harrison squeezed my shoulder gently. Jennifer sat motionless, her perfect facade finally, completely shattered. Marcus, who'd been watching from the back of the courtroom, had already disappeared. Daniel approached me slowly, his face ravaged by tears and shame. Mom, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to apologize for. Not here, I interrupted gently. Not now, we'll talk later, Daniel. When you're ready, when I'm ready. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw both the child I'd raised and the man who'd betrayed me, saw his weakness and his courage, his shame and his awakening. Daniel, I said quietly, I forgive you because you're my son, because I know Jennifer manipulated you, exploited your guilt over your father's death, twisted your love into a weapon against me. I forgive you because at the last moment, when it mattered most, you chose truth. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. But I continued, my voice firm. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You allowed that woman to torture me for months. You watched strangers tear through my bedroom. You stood silent while she tried to steal everything your father built. You almost let her succeed. Daniel's face crumpled. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Then use that regret, I told him. Use it to become better, stronger, more aware. Get away from Jennifer. Get therapy. Do the work of understanding how you allowed yourself to be manipulated. Become the man your father believed you could be. I touched his cheek gently, a gesture I'd made countless times when he was a child. If you do that work, if you become that man, maybe someday we can rebuild our relationship, but it starts with you rebuilding yourself. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'll do it, Mom. I promise. Don't promise me, I said. Promise yourself, promise your father, and then prove it through your actions, not your words. I walked away then, leaving Daniel standing in the courtroom, facing the consequences of his choices. Harrison walked beside me out of the courthouse, into the bright sunlight of a September afternoon. The air smelled like freedom. How do you feel? Harrison asked. Exhausted, I admitted. Relieved, angry, sad, triumphant, all of it at once. That sounds about right. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. DA wants to meet with you tomorrow. Jennifer's being arrested within the hour. Multiple charges. She's not getting bail. I showed the message to Harrison. He nodded with satisfaction. Jennifer built an elaborate trap for you, Margaret. But she forgot the first rule of traps. Always make sure you're not standing in one yourself. We reached my car. Actually, my car again, not something Jennifer could threaten to take away. I unlocked it, then paused. Harrison, what you and Sarah did for me, I can never repay you. Robert was my dearest friend, Harrison replied. Protecting you was my way of honoring his memory. Besides, he smiled slightly. I really enjoyed destroying Jennifer's case. That woman underestimated both of us. She underestimated a lot of things. I agreed, including how strong a 72-year-old widow can be when someone threatens what she loves. I drove home alone, windows down, feeling 6 months of terror and violation lifting from my shoulders. The weight didn't disappear completely. Trauma doesn't heal that quickly, but it lightened, became bearable. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long moment, looking at the house Robert and I had built our lives in. My house, my home, my sanctuary, reclaimed. I walked inside, locked the door behind me, and stood in the entryway. The house felt different now, lighter, cleaner, like Jennifer's presence had been a toxic cloud that was finally dissipating. I walked through each room, reclaiming my space, removed the generic artwork Jennifer had hung, brought Robert's photographs out of storage, rearranged furniture back to configurations that felt like home. In the bedroom, my sanctuary. I opened the drawers Jennifer's people had ransacked. The disarray had been fixed. but the violation remained in memory. I carefully reorganized everything, reclaiming my private space. Then I sat on my bed, pulled out my phone, and called my daughter overseas. We'd barely spoken since Robert's funeral. Jennifer had been intercepting communications, but I hadn't known that until Sarah's investigation revealed it. "Mom," my daughter Anna's voice, surprised and concerned. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, and realized it was true. "Everything is okay now. But I need to tell you what's been happening, and I need to hear your voice." We talked for 3 hours. I told her everything. She cried, raged, made immediate plans to fly home. "Mom, I should have been there. I should have known." "Jennifer was very good at isolation," I said. "But it's over now. She's going to face criminal charges." "I'm safe. The house is safe. Everything your father built is protected." After we hung up, I made tea in Robert's favorite mug and sat in his study. I opened his journal to the last entry, reading his words about protecting me, about regretting his trust in Daniel's advice, about wanting to fix his mistakes. "I finished it, my love," I whispered to the empty room. "I protected what we built. I kept our home, and I'm still standing." I felt Robert's presence then, as clearly as if he were sitting beside me. Not a ghost, just love, persisting beyond death, beyond grief, beyond every attempt to destroy what we'd created together. I placed my hand on his journal and made a promise. "I'm not just going to survive this, Robert. I'm going to live, really live, the way you would have wanted me to." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A new day ending. A new chapter beginning. I was 72 years old. I'd survived the loss of my husband, the betrayal of my family, and an elaborate scheme to steal my life. And I was ready to discover what came next. The criminal investigation moved with surprising speed. Jennifer was arrested the day after the hearing, charged with elder financial abuse, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The recordings of her discussing helping nature along, regarding my death added potential charges of conspiracy to commit harm. Marcus disappeared initially, but police located him 3 days later, trying to board an international flight. He was arrested and charged as a co-conspirator. The local news covered the story. My phone rang constantly with reporters requesting interviews. I declined them all. This wasn't about publicity or revenge. This was about justice and reclaiming my life. Daniel filed for divorce within a week. He moved into a small apartment and began intensive therapy, working through the manipulation he'd endured and the choices he'd made. He sent me letters, not asking for forgiveness, which I'd already given, but documenting his progress, his realizations, his commitment to change. I read each letter but didn't respond immediately. Healing takes time. Rebuilding trust takes longer. Harrison refused payment for his services. "Robert saved my life once, in a way I never told you about," he said cryptically. This was my debt to him, finally repaid. Sarah Chen became an unlikely friend. She stopped by occasionally for coffee, sharing stories of other cases, other victims she'd helped. We formed a bond, two women who understood that survival sometimes requires becoming your own protector. The check for restitution arrived 6 weeks after the hearing. $53,000, the fraudulent credit card debt, apartment lease payments, Dr. Morrison's consulting fee, and court-ordered damages. I stared at that check for a long time, thinking about what it represented. Jennifer's greed, quantified. My suffering, monetized. I donated it all to a local organization supporting elder abuse victims. The money felt tainted. I didn't want it in my accounts. Didn't want to benefit financially from Jennifer's crimes. Better to transform her poison into something healing for others. My daughter Anna flew home and stayed for 2 weeks. We reconnected, rebuilt the relationship Jennifer had systematically damaged through intercepted communications. Anna was horrified by what had happened, guilty that she hadn't known, fiercely protective in her rage. "I should have visited more," she said repeatedly. "I should have checked on you." Jennifer was very good at isolation. I reminded her, and I was lost in grief. We were both vulnerable, but it's over now. We spent those 2 weeks cleaning the house together, removing every trace of Jennifer's presence. We repainted walls, rearranged furniture, planted new flowers in the garden. Robert had loved, slowly, carefully. We transformed my house back into my home. I began attending a support group for elder abuse survivors. Listening to others' stories, I realized how common these situations were. How many elderly people faced financial exploitation, manipulation, and worse from family members or caregivers. How often shame and fear kept victims silent. I started speaking at community centers, sharing my story, educating seniors about warning signs of financial exploitation. Document everything. I told audiences, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And most importantly, you are never too old, never too vulnerable, never too broken to fight back. The responses were overwhelming. People approached me after these talks with their own stories, their own fears, their own questions. I connected them with resources, with Sarah's services, with legal support. My violation became purposeful, transformed into advocacy. Harrison introduced me to other attorneys specializing in elder law. Together, we began pushing for stronger protections, clearer guardianship standards, better oversight of medical evaluations used in competency proceedings. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license. The state board found his evaluation of me was financially motivated and professionally negligent. He faced separate civil suits from other families whose elderly relatives had been subjected to similar questionable evaluations. The system had failed to protect me, but maybe by exposing that failure, I could help protect others. 3 months after the hearing, Jennifer's trial date was set. Her attorney was negotiating a plea deal. Jennifer facing the evidence Harrison had compiled was too risky. The recordings alone would destroy her credibility with any jury. I received a call from the prosecutor. In Mrs. Whitmore, Jennifer's attorney is proposing a plea. She'll plead guilty to elder financial abuse and fraud, accept a 3-year prison sentence, pay full restitution, and accept permanent prohibition from working with vulnerable populations. In exchange, we dropped the conspiracy charges related to the recorded conversations about harming you. 3 years seems light for what she did, I said. It is, the prosecutor agreed. But trials are unpredictable. This guarantees she serves time, loses her credibility, and can never do this to another elderly person in a professional capacity. It's justice, if not perfect justice. I thought about sitting through a trial, reliving every violation, listening to Jennifer's attorneys try to discredit me. I thought about the energy it would take, the emotional cost, the publicity. I'll accept the plea, I said, but I want to give a victim impact statement at sentencing. Absolutely, you've earned that right. Jennifer's plea was entered 2 weeks later. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for January, 4 months after the guardianship hearing that had changed everything. Daniel continued his therapy, continued his letters. He'd sold everything Jennifer had wanted him to keep and donated the proceeds to the elder abuse organization. I supported. It was a start. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement, restitution in its own form. I attended Thanksgiving at Anna's house, the first holiday without Robert, without Daniel, without the family structure I'd known for decades. It should have been sad. Instead, it felt like liberation. Anna's children, my grandchildren, were there. They were older now. Teenagers who'd been distant during Jennifer's manipulation. Now they hugged me, asked questions, wanted to understand what had happened to their grandmother. I told them age-appropriate versions of the truth, that sometimes people we trust hurt us, that fighting back is hard but necessary, that family means protecting each other, not exploiting vulnerability. My oldest grandson asked, "Grandma, were you scared?" Terrified, I admitted. Every single day. But you fought anyway? I fought anyway, because your grandfather taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act, despite fear. That night, after the grandchildren had gone to bed, Anna and I sat on her porch drinking wine and watching stars. "Mom, what are you going to do now?" she asked. "With the house? With your life?" "I'm going to live," I said simply. "Really live." Robert spent his last weeks worried about protecting me. I spent 6 months terrified and fighting. Now I'm going to honor both of those experiences by embracing whatever time I have left. That sounds like a plan, Anna said, smiling. It's not much of a plan, I admitted, but it's mine. On the anniversary of Robert's death, I visited his grave with flowers and news. It was a cold December day, gray skies threatening snow, but I needed to be there, needed to tell him what had happened, what I'd protected, what I'd become. I knelt beside his headstone, placed the flowers gently on the frozen ground, and spoke aloud. Robert, I kept our home. I fought off Jennifer and her schemes. I protected everything you built. The house is mine. The life we created is intact. The wind picked up, rustling through bare branches overhead. Daniel is trying to change, trying to become better. I don't know if we'll ever repair our relationship completely, but he's doing the work that has to count for something. I touched the cold stone, tracing his name with my fingertips. I'm not the same person you left behind, my love. I'm stronger now, harder, more aware. The grief hasn't gone away, but it's transformed into something I can carry instead of something that crushes me. Tears ran down my face, cold in the winter air. I'm ready to say goodbye to the grief and hello to whatever comes next. That doesn't mean I'm forgetting you. It means I'm finally ready to honor your memory by living, not just surviving. I pulled the chain from around my neck, the one holding Robert's wedding ring, which I'd worn throughout the entire ordeal, the ring that had touched his finger for 40 years, that represented our vows, our partnership, our love. I placed it on his headstone, a symbolic release. I'll always love you, Robert, but I need to let go of carrying you with me everywhere. You're here, in this place, at peace. I need to be out there, in the world, at peace, too. I stood, brushed dirt from my knees, took one last look at the grave. Thank you, I whispered, for the warning, for Harrison's name, for 40 years of love, for teaching me that protecting what matters requires courage. I walked back to my car without looking back. It felt right, complete. The sentencing hearing arrived in January. I'd prepared my victim impact statement, revised it dozens of times, trying to capture the full weight of what Jennifer had done without descending into anger or melodrama. The courtroom was less crowded than the guardianship hearing. Just me, Harrison, Sarah, the prosecutor, Jennifer and her attorney, and Judge Hendricks again, who'd requested to preside over the sentencing. Jennifer looked different, thinner, older, prison orange instead of designer clothes. No makeup, no styled hair. The mask had been stripped away completely. When it was time for my statement, I stood at the podium and looked directly at Jennifer. When I found strangers ransacking my bedroom, I began. I didn't understand what was happening. I couldn't comprehend that my own family would violate me so completely, that the woman my son married would systematically plan my destruction. Jennifer wouldn't meet my eyes. You didn't just try to steal my house, Jennifer. You tried to steal my identity, my dignity, my independence, and ultimately my life. You manufactured evidence to paint me as incompetent. You isolated me from friends and support systems. You exploited my grief when I was most vulnerable. My voice remained steady, strong. You coached witnesses, bribed doctors, forged documents, and plotted my death with your lover. You treated my suffering as an inconvenience and my potential death as a business transaction. Now Jennifer looked up, and I saw tears on her face. Real or performed? I didn't know, didn't care. But you failed, I continued. You failed because you underestimated a 72-year-old widow. You assumed grief made me weak when it actually made me stronger. You thought age made me vulnerable when it actually gave me perspective and determination. I looked at Judge Hendricks. Your Honor, Jennifer deserves every day of the sentence she's receiving, not as punishment, but as a consequence, as a message to others who would prey on elderly people, who would exploit vulnerability, who would treat elder abuse as acceptable behavior. I turned back to Jennifer. I hope you use your time in prison to understand what you did, to develop the conscience you clearly lack, to become someone capable of genuine remorse instead of calculated manipulation. I stepped back from the podium. That's all I have to say. Judge Hendricks thanked me, then delivered Jennifer's sentence. 3 years in prison, full restitution, permanent prohibition from working with vulnerable populations, and 5 years of supervised probation after release. Mrs. Jennifer Whitmore, the judge said, you attempted to rob a grieving widow of her home, her dignity and her life through systematic fraud and abuse. You have shown this court the darkest side of human nature, the willingness to exploit trust and prey on vulnerability for personal gain. I hope you use your time in custody to reflect on the harm you've caused. The gavel fell. Jennifer was led away in handcuffs. I watched her go without satisfaction, without triumph, just a quiet sense that justice, imperfect but real, had been served. Outside the courthouse, Sarah hugged me. You did it, Margaret. You won. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this alone. Harrison handed me a folder. This is everything we compiled during the investigation. Every document, every recording, every photograph. Your story, fully documented. What you do with it is up to you. I took the folder, feeling its weight. I think I'll write it down. A memoir, maybe. So others know they can fight back, that they're not alone. I think that's a wonderful idea, Harrison said. 6 months after the sentencing, I'd transformed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days of Jennifer's siege. The house was truly mine again, filled with light and memories that no longer ached quite so sharply. I'd renovated Robert's study, transforming it from a shrine to his absence into a functional workspace where I wrote my memoir, documenting everything that had happened. A publisher had expressed interest in the manuscript. Stories like yours need to be told, the editor said during our phone call. Too many people face elder abuse in silence. Your voice could help break that silence. I joined the board of the Elder Abuse Prevention Organization. I'd been supporting, my experience gave me credibility, my voice gave them power. Together we lobbied for legislative changes, better oversight, stronger protections. Sarah and I became genuine friends. She'd helped save my life, and that created a bond that transcended normal acquaintance. We met for coffee weekly, trading stories, offering support, occasionally working together when she needed someone to speak with her abuse survivors. Daniel completed 6 months of intensive therapy and asked to meet. I agreed, choosing a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. When he arrived, he looked different. Clearer, more present, less the manipulated puppet Jennifer had created. Mom, he began, and his voice was steady. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness again. You already gave me that, and I'm grateful. I'm here to show you the work I've been doing and to ask if someday, maybe we could start rebuilding a relationship. Tell me about the work, I said. He did. Detailed his therapy sessions, his growing understanding of how Jennifer had exploited his guilt over Robert's death, his recognition of the warning signs he'd ignored, his commitment to becoming more aware, more present, more capable of protecting the people he loved instead of enabling their abuse. I've also been volunteering, he said, at a men's domestic violence support group, learning about manipulation tactics, sharing my experience, trying to help other men recognize when they're being controlled. I studied my son across the cafe table, saw genuine change, genuine growth, not perfect, not complete, but real. I'm proud of you for doing this work, I said quietly, for facing what you allowed to happen and choosing to become better. Does that mean? It means we can start, I interrupted gently, slowly, carefully. We can begin rebuilding trust. But Daniel, it will take time. Years, maybe. The damage Jennifer caused through you was severe. It doesn't heal quickly. I understand, he said. I'll wait as long as it takes. And Mom, thank you for giving me this chance. We met monthly after that. Brief lunches where we talked about his therapy, his volunteer work, his progress, where I shared updates on my advocacy work, my memoir, my healing, where we slowly, carefully began constructing something new from the rubble of what Jennifer had destroyed. Anna visited more frequently now, bringing the grandchildren, filling the house with noise and life and joy. They helped me plant a new garden, choosing flowers and vegetables, creating beauty where Jennifer had let everything die. Harrison retired from active practice, but remained a friend and advisor. We had dinner once a month, trading stories, discussing legal cases, occasionally arguing about politics with the easy comfort of old friends. Marcus received a 4-year sentence for his role in the conspiracy. Unlike Jennifer, he showed no remorse, maintaining he'd done nothing wrong. Some people never develop the capacity for genuine conscience. I attended my first grief support group meeting since the day I'd come home early and found strangers in my bedroom. The facilitator, Ellen, welcomed me back with a hug. "Margaret," she said, "we thought we'd lost you. Are you okay?" I told the group a condensed version of what had happened. Their reactions ranged from horror to outrage to admiration. Several people approached me after, asking for advice, sharing their own fears of exploitation. "You fought back," one elderly woman said, tears in her eyes. "You give me hope that I can protect myself too." That became my mission. Not just surviving, but transforming survival into empowerment, using my experience to help others recognize warning signs, trust their instincts, fight back when necessary. I spoke at conferences, at community centers, at senior living facilities. My message was simple. You are never too old to protect yourself. Your voice matters. Your rights matter. And if someone tries to take those things from you, fight back with every resource available. The memoir found a publisher. Reclaiming Home: How I Defeated a Scheme to Steal My Life would be released in the fall. The advance wasn't large, but money wasn't the point. Reaching people was the point. Helping them protect themselves was the point. I dedicated the book to Robert, for my husband, who tried to protect me even from beyond death, and taught me that courage is loving something enough to fight for it. On my 73rd birthday, I threw a party. Nothing elaborate, just close friends, Anna and the grandchildren, Daniel tentatively included, Sarah and Harrison, members of my support group and advocacy network. We filled my house with conversation and laughter and life. Standing in my kitchen, my reclaimed, protected, beloved kitchen, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Robert's death. Not happiness exactly, because grief still lived in my bones, but peace. Purpose. The quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd protected what mattered and transformed violation into strength. Sarah raised a glass for a toast. To Margaret, who showed us all that survival is just the beginning, that true strength lies in choosing to thrive after trauma. Everyone raised their glasses. I looked around at faces of people I loved, people who'd supported me, people I was helping through my advocacy. This was family now, not defined by blood, but by choice, by support, by mutual protection and genuine care. "Thank you," I said simply, "for standing with me, for helping me reclaim my life, for reminding me that I was never alone in this fight." Later, after everyone had left, after I'd cleaned dishes and restored my house to quiet order, I stood in Robert's former study, now my office, and looked at the manuscript sitting on my desk. 600 pages documenting my nightmare and survival. "I did it, Robert," I whispered to the empty room. "I protected what we built. I turned our suffering into something meaningful. I'm living the life you wanted me to have." I felt that presence again, that sense of Robert's love persisting beyond death, not a ghost, just the eternal nature of genuine connection. I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the room that had been violated, reclaimed, and transformed into sanctuary again. I lay down in the bed I'd shared with Robert for 40 years, no longer reaching for his absent warmth, but grateful for the memories we'd created. Tomorrow, I'd continue my advocacy work. I'd write more chapters of my memoir. I'd meet Daniel for our monthly lunch. I'd call Anna and make plans for the grandchildren's visit. I'd live the full, purposeful life I'd fought so hard to protect. But tonight, I simply rested, in my home, in my bed, in the peace of knowing I'd faced my demons and won. I'm standing in my kitchen now. The same kitchen where Jennifer once plotted my destruction, and I'm making tea in the china cups Robert and I received as wedding gifts 50 years ago. The house is quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet now, not the suffocating silence of grief and fear. The morning sun streams through windows. I've cleaned myself, casting warm light across counters I've reclaimed. Everything here is mine again, truly, completely mine. If my story touched you, if it gave you strength, or made you think of someone who needs to hear it, please share this video, click that like button, subscribe to this channel, and most importantly, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever faced something similar. Your stories matter, your survival matters. I read every comment and I answer as many as I can because connection is how we heal. To anyone out there enduring what I endured, you are not alone, you are not too old, too tired, or too broken to fight back. Document everything. Screenshots, photographs, recordings, when legal. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Find your Harrison, your Sarah, your support system. They exist even when isolation makes them seem impossible to reach. And remember, they can take your possessions, but they cannot take your dignity unless you surrender it. They can manufacture evidence, but they cannot manufacture your truth. They can exploit your vulnerability, but they cannot destroy your strength unless you allow it. I'm 73 years old now. I've published a memoir. I've spoken at conferences. I've helped other abuse survivors fight back and reclaim their lives. I've rebuilt relationships worth saving and released those that weren't. I've transformed my violation into purpose and my survival into advocacy. My house, the one Jennifer tried to steal, the one Robert worked his entire life to build, is filled with light and life again. Anna visits regularly. The grandchildren play in the garden, where Robert used to grow tomatoes. Daniel and I are slowly, carefully rebuilding trust through honest conversations and genuine change. Jennifer is serving her sentence. Marcus is serving his. Dr. Morrison lost his license. The system that failed to protect me has been strengthened slightly through advocacy and legislative change. Perfect justice doesn't exist, but real justice happened. That has to be enough. I wake up every morning in my bedroom, in my bed, in my home. I make coffee in my kitchen. I work in my office. I garden in my yard. Every single action is a reclamation. Every single day is a victory. Some nights, I still feel Robert's presence, not haunting, just loving, still protecting me from whatever distance separates life from death. I talk to him sometimes, telling him about my day, my work, my healing. I kept my promise. I tell him, I protected what we built. I finished what you started. And I'm living, Robert, really living, not just surviving, but thriving. I hope wherever you are, you're proud. I believe he is. I have to believe that, because that belief gives me strength to continue fighting, continue healing, continue helping others who face what I faced. I'm Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. I'm a widow, a mother, a grandmother, an author, and an advocate. I'm a 73-year-old woman who faced systematic abuse from her own family and fought back with everything she had. I'm still here, still standing, still fighting for myself and others who need someone to show them that survival is possible, that justice is achievable, that reclaiming your life after violation is not just a dream, but a choice you make every single day. And so can you. Whatever you're facing, whatever violation threatens to break you, whatever manipulation tries to steal your dignity, you can fight back. You can survive. You can reclaim what's yours. You can transform your suffering into strength and your survival into something meaningful. I did it at 72, grieving and isolated and terrified. If I can do it, so can you. Never give up. Never surrender your dignity. Never stop fighting for what matters. Your life is worth protecting. Your home is worth defending. Your story is worth telling. Stay strong. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Fight back. And know that somewhere out here, I'm fighting alongside you, cheering for your survival, believing in your strength, even when you doubt it yourself. We are not alone. We are never alone. And together we are powerful beyond measure. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for fighting your own battles with courage and determination. I see you. I honor you. I stand with you. Now go reclaim your life. You deserve nothing less.